Looks like the lobby is slowing down, so hopefully everybody has transitioned over, and I do want to be respectful of your time today since it is a little afterwards. This is our second webinar in the series that TFND and DOH are collaborating on to provide some extra education for you all. Today we have Andrew Horn, our local media expert, excuse me. And so I will turn it over to him, and so you can learn about all things media today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the introduction, Abby. And if anyone considers me a true expert, then we have a long, long way to go. All right, let me see if I can get this going. Can you all see my presentation now?
Yes, it is coming up. There it is.
All right. So again, this is one for media training, really focusing on local media since that is what most of you are going to be dealing with. Again, sponsored by TFND, but this could not be done without the collaboration and the support of our partners at the Department of Health. So I want to give you guys all the kudos as well. You all are going to learn an awful lot in the next hour and a half-ish, 2 hours, however long this takes. If you have questions, that's all right. Go ahead and put them in the chat. Abby can then flag me down. We're planning just quick little Q&As at the end of each section because this is a lot and this might be new for a lot of you. So we'll see how this goes. So about me, I graduated in 2016 from the University of Maryland, College Park. I'm a very proud Maryland Terrapin. And then it took me about 5 months after I graduated to find a job out here in Bismarck. I used to joke with kids in school that I would go and move anywhere in the country except Bismarck, North Dakota. Little did I know life had other plans for me. So I'm very happy I made the move and worked at KFYR for about 2.5 years before switching over. As Heather likes to say, she poached me from the news station and have been at TFND ever since January 2020. That seems like 15 years ago at this point. When I was at KFYR, I started covering the medical beat, doing a lot of the medical stories, and then I kind of morphed into an all-around reporter wherever needed. Did a lot with the city of Dickinson, did a lot with agriculture, political reporting. I mean, you name it, I've probably covered it. Here's some fun pictures from my time. The middle picture, I'm a huge Star Wars fan as well, so that was covering the premiere, I believe, of episode 8, The Last Jedi. And I'm the one all the way in the left with the helmet and the Star Wars tie. That was right after a live shot. On the far left, that's me in a Black Hawk helicopter for the Memorial Day flyover that the North Dakota National Guard does. And the two on the right are me in my home away from home at the Capitol. A lot of people saw me, they knew me, and a fair chunk of them, when they saw me with the camera, would turn and run the other direction. All right, so what are we planning on doing today? We're going to get a better understanding of what a journalist actually does on a day-to-day basis. And part of that is going to be dispelling myths around how interviews and requests for stories go. And obviously, we're going to prepare you for media interviews in your own communities so we can really get the tobacco control message out there, because that really is going to be the best way to do it. So let's start with what a journalist actually does. Overall, they're always seen as like the Woodward and Bernstein. They're watchdogs to hold people in power accountable. You see deep investigative pieces all over the country going on, and that's great, but that's not all we do. And here in North Dakota, journalists produce easily digestible content on meaningful topics for the communities that they live in. Okay, the reporters that you're seeing, they're not hubbed out of New York City, LA, or anything like that. They're living here in the community. The actions that they're covering also affect them. So it really is important to understand that 99.99% of the journalists you're going to run into are people who live in the communities that you also help serve. And most of the interactions, again, will be as an expert, not as the subject. I think it's going to be hard. You're going to be hard pressed to find journalists pitching you story after story where you're the focus. What many of you are going to be are the expert voice in that story, which is good. It's a lot easier that way. So when we're talking about the relationship with journalists, the number one thing is having a relationship with them, and that's a long process to build. Okay, you don't just magically become someone's best friend overnight. So it's going to be about working with them, going to be about talking with them, and really having a good connection, good rapport with them. And it's going to be built around trust, and that is a two-way street. You are going to need to trust the reporter to cover whatever you're asking them to cover in a fair manner and give you, fair time. But they're also going to have to trust you that you are the expert in that subject, whatever it may be. They're going to have to trust that you're going to be reliable not just in the information, but when they call you and try and set up an interview, that you actually follow through with the interview. So that trust is really important, and it is definitely a two-way street. And the good reporters will call you or reach out to you for more than when they just need a quote from you. As Heather can definitely attest to, there were times I just showed up in the TFND office when I had a little bit of downtime, knowing that there could possibly be a moment when I would need a quote in the future. So I worked really hard to build that relationship, and I somehow turned it into a career. So I guess that worked even better than I thought. As we're going to go through this, I unfortunately still do speak in some journalist jargon. I will try my very best to avoid that. But here are some definitions that you're absolutely going to need to know with this, and you'll hear us throughout the presentation. We've got press releases, which many of you are familiar with, but they are put together in an email, and it contains all the pertinent information about a potential story. Anyone who worked with us in Quit Week, we sent one of these out. If you hear me say pitch is another name for a story idea. They are called pitches in the newsroom. So I will go back and forth between that term. A soundbite, very simple. It's just the quote that the reporter uses in their piece. And I have the example down here: tobacco products are harmful to people's health. And it'll be usually set up as your first and last name and then what your title is. Sometimes they do the title first and the name. That just depends on the reporter. It doesn't make that big of a difference. Coming from TV, we put a couple TV terms down there as well. A package is a longer form story, between a minute and a minute 30. Usually get 2 or more voices, and then you'd have a reporter track in between. These packages require substantial video elements, meaning if all you have to show is your office, package probably not going to be the best thing for you, in which case it would move down to what's called a VOSOT. VOSOT is just a super condensed package. You get one soundbite out of it and about 3 sentences to describe what the story is, and then usually a little reporter tag. They require a lot less video. We will be discussing shortly the importance of knowing when you have video elements and when you don't have video elements, and maybe how you can work around that. All right, but before we get to that, this is probably the number one thing everyone needs to know, is that the difference between on the record, off the record, background, whatever. You have four different types of record in terms of the conversation. You have on the record, which means full information, full name, you're identified, your name is out there, all the information is out there. That is what 99% of what you're going to be doing in terms of interviewing will be, is on the record. Then you get into background and deep background, and you see I have the same definition for each. The best way I could put it is that background and deep background are used a lot in reporting in Washington, D.C. You will hear things from, if we're talking about the military, you will hear Pentagon officials. Senior Pentagon officials would be background. Deep background would be defense officials. And the reason that they use that is people who still want to give the information, but they're maybe not able to give their name on it. You guys will not encounter background and deep background very much. And off the record would mean that the source or the information can't be used. So if you guys agree to it, if you're talking off the record and, give them a whole bunch of information about different tobacco use rates in North Dakota, they would not be able to use that from you. Who grants on and off the record? It is always the reporter, not you. You are always to assume that you are on the record unless it's otherwise specified and agreed to between you and the reporter. That has gotten people in trouble in the past. I understand that, but you need to understand that it is the reporter who sets on and off the record. So always assume that you are on the record when you're talking with the reporter. And then this is from the Associated Press, which is more than just the print side. Journalists, whether they're TV, radio, digital, whatever, take a lot of guidance from the Associated Press. And what they say is that you start on the record, and even if you set the conditions off the record, that reporter is going to try again to get some of that record on, or some of that information on the record. Okay, so again, 99% of what you guys are going to be handling is on the record, very standard interviewing with local journalists, not much of a problem. But I want to lay this out for you all now that there are different levels of it. And in case you're unclear on anything like this, I'll make sure you guys get the slide in this useful little table I put together about when they can use the information and when they can use your name. So in the process of putting this together, it was more than just my personal experience. We also had TV journalists, some radio journalists, and other print journalists. I reached out to them and asked what they wanted from sources. And so we've compiled a list of that in here as well. And number one, this is from every single source I asked, plus myself, do not lie. If you're in an interview and you don't know the information, I don't know, I'll have to check on that, is a perfectly acceptable answer. Or, I think the estimate is around this, but I'm not sure what the exact number is. Perfectly acceptable answer. Do not say that 150,000 North Dakotans are dying from tobacco use each year when you're trying to make a point, because they will very easily debunk that. And then the story is going to be about how you're lying instead of whatever the topic should have been. So again, tell the truth. Always the best thing to do. Or if you don't know, you can tell them you don't know. Number two, if you have a press release and you're sending it for a certain day, make sure someone is going to be able to interview that day at that time that you're kind of bringing them there. It's happened before. It's very infuriating for a journalist when you send out a press release and then you say, oh, sorry, we don't have anyone to talk about it. Got to make sure you clear the schedules a little bit, because this is part of that relationship building where you help them out a little bit. They will help you out. 3, call back in a timely manner. I know this can get hard, especially during COVID when people are tied up in other things, but when you all are when you're working with journalists and you see that a message comes through, do everything you can to get back to them and let them know, here's the information. Yes, I'll be able to talk. No, I can't talk today, whatever it may be, because their deadlines are always tight. And whether they're working on a story for the same day or 3 weeks in advance, the deadline is always tight because you're always working on multiple stories. So the journalists, they have a constant deadline, if you will. if they ask for certain information and it's going to take 3 days to compile, tell them that. Tell them it's going to take me about 3 days to compile this and work with them. If it's a 15-minute search, say, yeah, I will try and get it to you today. When do you need it? As soon as possible will be the answer then. But if it's only going to take 15 minutes, try and get it to them that same day. And again, all about building the relationships. This is all critical part on your end for building the relationships so that when it then comes time for the journalist to input that, they'll be able to input, and that will usually come in with other coverage, other story ideas. Make sure you know your topic inside and out. Pretty self-explanatory, and all of you do, but just make sure you know what you're talking about front and back. They will try and get, a couple extra questions in there that maybe they didn't prep you with before. They're not trying to trip you up. What they're doing is trying to get a snazzy soundbite out of it, if we're being quite honest. You're always going to hear follow the money as well when you talk about journalists covering different stories. Expect a question regarding cost and where that comes from if it's applicable to the story. And that's really the simplest way I can put that is if you're talking about a program that you guys are putting into place, then assume they're going to want to know how much that program costs and where that money is coming from. These next two are really important. You can always ask to read back a quote, but you are not going to get any editorial overview of a story before it publishes. So if you're not sure how your quote sounded, you can ask them to read it back, but you will not get a chance to tell them how to write it into the story. And then if there is an error or happens to be an error in the story and you're absolutely sure that it's an error, call the reporter and discuss it with them and then try and get them to fix it as quickly as possible. If you do the step of reading back the quotes, you are going to avoid the future calls for errors with that, and it just makes things a lot easier. And finally, we'll talk about story pitches a little later in the presentation, but when you're going to get a story pitch together, make sure you can answer the question, why does this matter, or so what? And if a reporter calls with a story idea, don't say, hey, that's a great idea, we're going to call a news conference and bring everyone in. Show them that little bit of respect that they did the enterprising work to come up with a good idea. Give them the reward of letting them have it. And that, again, huge in building the relationships. TV people, we are the neediest journalists you are ever going to meet. Where TV is a visual medium, you need different pictures, different video to help tell the story. If you have things that you can shoot video for, that would be B-roll. That's great. If you don't, try and see if you can get some information, because as I've had to do a number of times, you can turn information into video by graphs and pictures and highlighting documents, really making more visual elements out of a non-visual story. But in order to do that, they will need the information. So, work with them as best as you can for the TV people. All right, I know I have absolutely inundated you guys with information, and there's going to be more. So before we get into the myths, Abby, are there any questions or anything coming up in the chat that I need to address?
I have not seen anything come through at this time.
Perfect. Y'all are rock stars. I'm very, very happy that we are doing this well. All right. So if we don't have any other myths, we'll go ahead and or any other questions, we'll go ahead and get into the myths. And this is going to be fun. So this whole section is things that you may hear from other people about journalists or reporters or other outlets. And this is hopefully going to give you more confidence to say that those people are wrong. Number one, and I put the air quotes on, the media. I promise you with every fiber of my being, They didn't pay me anywhere near enough to be part of a coordinated effort to run the world or be part of some big conglomerate as the media. That doesn't exist. Where that came from were from people who were trying to demonize how certain sides were covering them. So they all got lumped in, and local news got lumped in with a lot of cable news, with radio, with shock jocks, whatever. And everyone got lumped in as the media, and it became a catchy phrase. The media as an entity doesn't exist. So when you're identifying a media request, you need to ask yourself, who is the outlet that's wanting to speak with me? Getting a request from the New York Times is going to be very different than getting a request from the Bismarck Tribune or the Fargo Forum. Okay, knowing the difference between the national audience, the local papers, whether they're print, radio, TV, a general audience. So like the Bismarck Tribune, Fargo Forum would be a general audience. A specific audience would be like a medical publication for that, or any of the niche magazines that you see all along the convenience stores. Those would be specific audiences. General audiences, your TV, your newspapers for the most part, your radio, your news radio will be general. And the reason you got to ask yourself these questions is because some outlets are going to be extremely friendly to your cause, and some are going to be extremely hostile. I'm not going to say don't go on the ones that are going to be extremely hostile, but it's very hard to change the opinions of people who are already set in their ways and are trying to talk to you to catch you, quote, catch you in a lie and try and do some real shady gotcha kind of journalism. So just make sure you know who the outlets are before you're talking with them so that you can kind of prepare yourself for the questions that are going to be coming. Along that line, number 2 is that interviews are just them grilling me, or them, they're trying to make me look bad. What interviews should be, and I put that in all caps for a reason, they should be a conversation that happens to be recorded, and all the questions and answers would be genuine, just like you're talking to a friend. I know that doesn't always happen with the stuff, but the way it should be is a real easy conversation. It should not feel like you're pulling teeth. And if you're nervous before going into the interview, that is totally okay. Tell the reporter, I'm a little nervous. I'm not used to being recorded. I'm not used to being on camera. It's okay. The good ones will talk with you. They'll work to kind of rest your concerns on it, and everything should go off without a hitch. And then number 3, outlet X is out to get me. Just about every reporter you're going to encounter has an editor above them. That editor is going to make the final call about the story. There were times when I was reporting where my editors would tell me, hey, you need to tone down this a little bit. We can't quite say, XYZ about them. We need to go in slightly less strong language. But then they've also told me to ramp it up sometimes, that if I had the information proving something, then I could call them out. Reporters are going to work with their editors on all that. The one thing that isn't going to be tampered with or shouldn't be tampered with are the quotes. Okay, the copy around it will get changed, but your quote should not get changed. And if something is misquoted or is blatantly incorrect, you need to call them immediately. But again, make sure you are absolutely right, that they are wrong. All right. So we've covered basically what, a basic overview of what the journalists do. We've dispelled some myths and some concerns surrounding them. So now we're going to get into pitching stories. And this is stuff that a lot of you, if you're wanting to get media coverage, this is going to be real pertinent for you. So should you pitch a story? And the best answer is, I don't know. Should you? It's going to depend on whether you can answer some of the questions here on the screen. And one is timely or evergreen. A timely story means that the FDA comes out with an announcement they're taking certain products off the market, like through their pre-market authorization. If you had done an interview the next day after that came out, that would be a timely story. If you're looking to just do a story that, hey, we need to do more, we need to have more regulation around flavors, and we're just trying to get parents aware that flavored products are targeted toward youth. That's more of an evergreen story, meaning that I could run it on January 1st, I could run it on June 1st, or September 1st. The timely ones will follow other news, and you'll see that more like when something happens nationally and they try and spin a local angle on it. Number two, will it affect people in the area? If they're calling you about, reacting to some local ordinance in a California town, that doesn't really mean much to the people here in North Dakota. Okay, so have a good idea as whether whatever topic they're bringing will affect people in the area you cover. And probably the number one question you need to answer is, so what? If you're going to announce, let's say you want to do a press conference saying we want to get more regulation on flavored products here in North Dakota. The first question is, so what? Why would we care? And you expound from there. That is what gives the story the depth and really the hook for the journalist to cover it. So how do you pitch that story once you've answered a few of those questions from the previous slide? You need to be enthusiastic, but not blowing smoke. If you have a good story idea, tell them, but don't try and make something out of nothing. And if you're on a phone call with it, you're going to have about 30 seconds to hook them before they're going to be interested or not interested. And I will say this: if you are in a unit or with another company that has a public information officer or a media specialist or some sort of external media relations person, please go through them. I am not advocating for workarounds with this. I know many of the local public health units don't have PIOs, but for those that do, or media relations people, please go through them to help craft the story, craft the pitches. All right, so you've got your press release ready. You've answered your questions. You're ready to send it. Just a few things before you do. Make sure whatever day you're sending it for and whatever time frame you're aiming for to make people available, make sure they're actually available to do it. Make sure it's very clearly laid out on the press release. Such and such will be available from 1 to 3 p.m. on this day for interviews. And again, call them back in a timely manner. That's just reiterating what we said before. The press releases, when they go out, usually the first 30 minutes after they go out is when you're going to get the most of your inquiries. So really be ready for kind of an inundation and phone calls and emails after you send out a release. And while Zoom has made things a lot easier in terms of just being able to connect and do the interviews, do not take it as just like a fun Zoom with your family members. If they're wanting to talk with you over the computer, treat it as the same interview as if you're doing a phone interview or an on-camera interview. And that'll make your life a whole lot easier. Also want to mention the Swiss cheese press releases. Those who participated in Quit Week, you guys would have seen these. Usually we do Swiss cheese press releases for two reasons. It's either a unified messaging campaign or it's a recurring event and we don't feel like writing a brand new one every year. So Quit Week would be part of that unified messaging. If you're doing a toy drive, let's say December 15th every year, that would be like a recurring event. Okay, you are responsible for filling in the blanks. Please, if you're going to be part of a unified message, take the time to fill out the press release with it, because otherwise it's going to hurt the overall messaging. And you're probably wondering, well, how is it going to hurt the messaging? One, when you have unified messages and you get it from 30, 40, 50 different entities, it's going to hit harder in terms of the message and realize that there is some greater importance around what they're saying. And two, repeating that same message is going to increase the chance of media coverage, especially if it's a multi-agency approach. The way Quit Week works, with TFND being private nonprofit, with North Dakota Department of Health being a state agency, with the local public health units being involved, with the private partners, having such a wide array of people focusing on one message will drive the interest for the journalist as to, hey, why is this important? So if you get Swiss cheese releases, please make sure you do them. All right, take another quick break. I know I'm flying through this a little bit. Everyone's still doing good? Everyone got any questions? Or Abby, we doing all right?
There are no questions in the chat.
Man, maybe you all should be teaching this. All right. Let's get on to interviewing then. And this is my favorite one, because I'm sure if I came and stuck an $8,000 camera in your face and said we're going to be talking about, tobacco prevention in North Dakota, 80% of you would then start sweating and get real nervous. So let's make this a lot easier for you. Always assume that the microphone or the phone call or whoever you're talking with is on the record and they're recording. Okay, if you always assume the microphone is hot, you're not going to say anything dumb. KFYR was made worldwide famous years ago for a reporter named AJ Clemente, who was his first day anchoring, okay? His first day of work, and he got a name that he was trying to pronounce, and it was a difficult name for the story. And he said multiple expletives live on TV during the newscast. He got fired right away. It led to a pretty viral clip, and it was something that all the late night hosts were making fun of. But he went, I think, 6 years without working in journalism again until he got a second chance, and it really did kind of derail his career, and it brought a lot of heat under KFYR as well. So always assume the microphone is hot so that you don't get yourself into an unintended problem. Almost all the interviews you're going to do, unlike AJ Clemente, are going to be recorded, not live. So most of what you're going to be doing are set up, recorded interviews, which is going to be a lot easier for you. Because if you mess up while you're recorded, you just stop, take a breath, and you try and restate the answer. That's all right. And if you do happen to be doing a live shot and you jumble your words a little bit, just take a quick breath, restate your answer. It's okay if you jumble words for a second. It is not going to be the end of the world. So it's different over the phone than it is on camera. And I'm really hammering the point home for the TV side of it because of how much extra stuff they need and how visual it is. When the camera is recording, it will record everything. You will see your hand, you will see your hands move if you talk with your hands. If you're shifting in your chair, for sitting for an interview, or rocking back and forth if you're standing, they will see that. If they ask a question that is just bonkers stupid and you roll your eyes, they're going to see that. And then that's going to get you into other trouble. So just be conscious of the fact that when you're on camera, everything is going to be recorded. It's okay to talk with your hands, but just know that if you're talking with your hands, that will be in the picture. If you are standing for an interview, make sure you stand up tall with your knees slightly bent, because the last thing we need are people locking their knees and passing out in the middle of an interview. And if you're sitting, sit up straight so that you can project easily. They will do a mic test. I have never run into an interview where they didn't do a mic test, but if they don't, ask for one. Make sure that their microphone and their equipment is working well, because if it's not, it's actually going to distract people, because people will realize that the equipment is not working well, and then it will distract them and they won't pay attention as much to what you're saying. All right, so you get through the interview, you've had your knees slightly bent for a standing interview, you didn't pass out, you're doing great. All right, what happens then when they say that the interview's done? They're going to take your interview along with any others and they're going to compile the story. Most of the journalists are going to have had a chunk of the story pre-written and places to plug in your quotes. They will use your interview for both quotes and information confirmation. So if you say in there about 1,000 North Dakotans die every year from tobacco-related causes, that will likely be used not as a quote, but as a piece of information. The story will not be your full interview transcription. You are going to get a maximum of 3 points to hammer home, and in the very, very likely majority, you will not get more than 3 sound bites that they choose from your whole interview, and that's okay. What I always told people is if you focus on 2, focus on getting 2 good sound bites in a story. Between all the other interviews, they're not going to have the space or the time to put 2 in there, so you will be a majority of the story. You get 2 good sound bites, you should be good. All right, social media. So we worked on how to interview. Now we're going to work on the social media aspect of this. I will say that this is, in the last 10 years, this has now become a sort of a niche thing to an extremely important part of everyone's job. This is something that every day we would have meetings at KFYR, and they would tell us how our stories did from the day before. I could do a wildly important story, and it was covered well and very factual and all that, and it not do well on social media, and I would get railed in the meeting in the morning. I would get absolutely torn apart. So know that social media is very important, not just for you getting your message across, but it's also going to be important for the journalist trying to get their story out. So let's start with the platforms. There are tons of social media platforms. You can use all sorts of different ones, but Facebook is still king. Facebook is king for the engagement, for getting people to click on articles. It's just how it is right now. And despite all the various problems that Facebook has had, it is still the overwhelming favorite, the overwhelmingly used one. So what about other platforms that we've got? We've got TikTok, which is pretty new, already over 1 billion users, and I believe that was as of October of this year, so it's probably gone up since then. And 2/3 of those users are 29 and under. So if that's going to be your target audience, TikTok might be a better place to go. It would make, for a lot of the vaping stuff, TikTok would be useful. Twitter and Instagram, they are useful, but there's a weird gray area about how useful they actually are. Use them if you want, but Facebook is going to be the overwhelming favorite for that. And if you're going for a young audience, TikTok will probably be good to have stuff on there as well. All coming into an overarching golden rule: know your audience. If you know what audience you're trying to reach, you will be able to reach them easier by going on the platforms where they are. So now we're going to get into the is my post appropriate and what should I post part of this presentation. I will tell you that there are certain things, if you post now, you are going to end up getting yourself fired. So please, please take this section to heart. In your post on your personal or your professional page, do not swear. Don't be a racist. Don't say anything that you wouldn't say out loud to someone's face. I know it seems ridiculous to say that, but it needs to be said because every few weeks it seems like someone's social media is coming up and biting them in the butt for past posts. So make sure your personal page looks as professional as your professional page does. Your likes, shares, comments, retweets, whatever, might also be fair game in legal action. There was back in Maryland, there was a PIO, Public Information Officer for the Department of Natural Resources. And I met her when I was a student at University of Maryland. She was definitely a fiery personality. She said in a Facebook comment something about then gubernatorial candidate Ben Jealous. He was running against Larry Hogan. She said something that was perceived as derogatory. They then fired her over that, which she then sued to get her job back, and she won. Case in point being very gray legal area. And if you're unsure whether you should post or comment or like it, play it safe and don't. So now I've got a smattering of posts up here about is the post appropriate, and I wanted to get some physical examples out here. Let's start in the top left with the Joe Camel one. This is something that we saw during Quit Week, and I really wanted to point this out. Not that it isn't a striking image, but we know from the science that negative messaging around tobacco use can actually drive people to use it more and can reduce the chance that they quit. So when it's related to tobacco, please stay on positive or neutral messaging. Don't go on to the negative side. We'll go right under the Joe Camel one. This was a story that went nationwide about a NICU nurse who was Snapchatting pictures of babies. Okay, she was violating HIPAA. She was Snapchatting pictures of them, and I'm trying with every fiber of my being to give her the benefit of the doubt and saying that she was just trying to show these kids and, you know, have people think about them and try and be positive about it. But as you can see from one of the Snapchats, there was a baby apparently with its intestines on the outside of its body, and she Snapchatted and added the text to that. That is wildly inappropriate, and it violates HIPAA laws, so she got fired big time. The two on the right side of the screen, this is where knowing your audience comes into play. These were done by the Baltimore City Health Department trying to promote vaccinations, and they went with, quite honestly, a pretty flip response in order to try and get people vaccinated. This is not targeted at an older demographic. This is targeted at the millennials who live in Baltimore City, who live in about 3 different sections of Baltimore City. Okay, so this is very specific targeted advertising that got a lot of traction from the local media there because, as you can see from the messaging, it was pretty in your face, pretty brash. Post stuff like this at your own risk. It worked there with the people that they were trying to get, but it could very easily backfire. So going along with the is my post appropriate, let's go with what and when should I post. In terms of the what, information is always key. Information is the best thing you can give people. And when I say give them something to read, do not just put 6 words as a post with no picture on it, okay? You got to have some sort of media element, whether it's an infographic, whether you put the information in the post, you got to give them something to read so that their eyes stay there. And please make sure it's nonpartisan. With how divisive everything is today and how quick people are to just start throwing various expletives and words around on social media, do your best to make it nonpartisan. I will say on that line, giving them the information that tobacco is harmful for you is nonpartisan. That is a fact. Okay, nonpartisan doesn't mean don't give facts. What it means, and I'll use the example of the Affordable Care Act. One of the many provisions in that legislation was that insurance companies could start charging a tobacco surcharge for people who use tobacco products. If you made a message that said, President Obama is the greatest thing to happen since sliced bread, the tobacco surcharge that insurance companies can now charge should increase cessation and will overall lead to healthier people, that whole second part of your message is going to get lost because of the first part you said. So please stick to the information as best you can. And again, when you're posting pictures, videos, infographics, are not only going to be engaging for them to watch, but it's going to increase your reach in the algorithm. Another way to help the algorithm is to vary up your messaging. TFND just did a week-long salute, if you will, to our smoke-free air law. And we have to vary the messaging on those posts, even though they're all around the same topic. Because if we put very similar things time after time after time, especially on Facebook, that algorithm will notice that and will actually reduce the impact and reduce the reach. Another way to help that, if you're on your professional page, share it to your personal page, whatever that post is. The more engagements it gets, the better shelf life it's going to have. And in terms of shelf life, you're only looking at a few hours per post anyway. So posting frequently is good. Posting every 15 minutes is bad, as it'll drive you down. But breaking news is good. The whole point, threading the needle on posting is going to be key. And once you figure out the best way for you to post, it's really going to help your overall reach on your social media platforms. And this is how to schedule a post. I will make sure you all get the slide so it has this in here, but this is from Facebook. To do it on other platforms is difficult, and you usually need a specific social media managing site to do that, something like Hootsuite or something like that. So this is how to schedule a Facebook post within the back end of Facebook. I just wanted to make that clear. All right, and some other tips. Information is good. If you can get a story with real people, those are really, really good to have. When the Valley cases were popping up in 2019, Bismarck Burley Public Health did a great job at getting that patient, getting one of the first people to have confirmed a Valley case and having them tell her story. Those kind of things not only drive it home in terms of information and help with the engagement, but it puts a face to whatever you're talking about. And when people have a face to whatever issue you're talking about, it gives it a better chance of sinking in. Keep up with other news and trends. That goes in both with TikTok trends, if you're going to use that. I personally don't use TikTok, but keeping up with various things if you're trying to capitalize on messaging there, and keeping up with the news. You know, when the FDA was pumping out all their pre-market denials, staying on top of that will help. Hashtags are for those who know it better as the #. Hashtags can help expand an audience, and it'll also gather your post into one place. For Quit Week, and I use Quit Week 2021 for the one that we use this year, I can then type that in, and those posts will come up. All of those posts with that hashtag will come up, so you can look for people talking about the same thing. Same thing if you want to go more general and just go hashtag tobacco on it, so be it. But when you do them, please make sure there's no spaces, no special characters in them. Otherwise, it won't work. It has to be all one word. See, it's Quit Week 2021, no spaces. And finally, invite people to your page and your social media pages, because they cannot see the things that you're posting on your professional page if they don't follow you. It's also going to help bring make a bigger audience. A bigger audience changes the algorithm, help you get up in more people. The more people on your page, the better. So start with inviting your friends on Facebook. It's a very simple thing to do. All right. And that's all for me. I've got my contact info on there. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat. I'm absolutely here to help, and want to answer any questions that people may have.
I just wanted to comment on your statement about varying the messages. So for Thanksgiving, we had kind of scheduled Facebook posts just letting people know that we were out of the office, and Facebook like flagged those because we were kind of like posting the same message repeatedly, and it shut down our Facebook page, and we were unable to like appeal that and had to recreate our whole district health page over. So I just kind of wanted to point that out to everybody listening, that was a really hard lesson for us to learn, that we have to be careful, because that was a lot of followers then that we lost and have to work on rebuilding. So thank you, Andrew. It was a really good presentation, and even though I didn't have other questions, I learned a lot. So thank you. I'm glad
you all learned something from this. If you can learn one new thing every day, then you're doing pretty well for yourself. And yeah, that I know Facebook they've really amped up the flagging of posts during COVID. Once I'd say about July of 2020, with everything that was going on nationally and internationally, they started flagging a lot of posts. They started putting a lot of the disclaimers about what is information, what is misinformation, and just warning people. Twitter has done the same thing with it. So yes, varying the messaging will also prevent Facebook and Twitter from thinking that you're spam. They've taken a real hard stance against trying to get rid of bots. Bots are automated pages that post content to try and gain engagement. They've taken a real hard stance against bots, and just make sure you vary the messaging and have enough unique kind of postings that it looks like a human is doing it.
Chelsea asked a question. Is there such a thing as plagiarism on social media posts, such as copying pictures and subjects versus just sharing the post from the page?
Okay, Chelsea, two things with that. First off, sharing versus organically posting. Organically posting, meaning taking it and putting it on your own page, is always going to do better than sharing it from someone else's. However, sharing from someone else's is better than nothing. In terms of like plagiarism, most of the stuff, when it's out there, especially in like infographics that you get, already has copyrights on it. Things that are from the federal government or state government or whatever are free for you to use. That's a government resource that's okay for you to use. If you're working on trying to share someone's story, you see something on a friend's page and you want to try and get that out on your public health unit page, talk with that person, try and go through, and I know it's a lot of work, but go through the hoops of getting some sort of media release or some sort of permission from them to share it, because doing that work on the front end is always going to be easier than trying to protect the post on the back end. In terms of plagiarism, I mean, I've taken pictures and posted my own thing with them. I've especially on my phone when I'm tweeting, I will copy and save a photo and then tweet that same thing out. It doesn't work the same as like plagiarizing a research paper. So most of the stuff is fair game if it's out there. If you have any doubts, contact that person and see if you can use it.
There's another question from Kayla. Do you have any tips on sharing posts on Facebook, such as legal actions towards a post we shared due to sharing it from a different source / business?
In terms of, are they asking if I have any advice for the legal actions or just what some of those would be? With that, I guess when I mentioned the legal actions, just be very careful. And that was more for your personal pages about posting something that could then get you fired from your professional job. But yeah, I'm not I'm not a lawyer with all that. I'm just trying to give people to be careful on social media, because it can spiral out of control. And if you're unsure of posting something, it's probably better to not post it at all.
I think she said you had answered it with the plagiarism, so I think we covered that question for her. I don't see anything else right now, so if you have any questions for him, go ahead and come off mute or pop it in the chat. I'm not seeing anything come in, so if you are typing, I will just stall here for 2 more seconds and put in a little plug for our next webinar series. We do have a save the date for January 20th, same time, same Teams venue. So we will be announcing that, and the registration for that will be coming out after the 1st of the year. So Heather, did you have anything to add from TFND? Oops, I think you're still muted.
Fantastic presentation. Thank you for representing us so well today. And Abby, thank you for being such a gracious host and moderator. We really appreciate this partnership with the Department of Health putting on this educational series. So thanks to everyone who attended. Hope everyone has a great holiday season coming up and planned. Other than that, I am done talking. Thanks again.
Super. Well, nothing's coming in, so thank you very much, Andrew. I think it was very informative. We appreciate your time and your expertise. I would still concur that is the case on sharing this information. If they have any questions, you can obviously reach out to TFND, Andrew, or channel them through me, and I'll be sure and pass those along. Happy holidays to everyone, and have a lovely holiday season. Thank you.
Thanks so much.